Prometheus is one of the bleakest blockbusters ever made. Fans of the Alien franchise hate Prometheus because of its pretentious screenplay, irrational character motivations, and disconnect from previous Alien films. They're right. But what they're missing is that Prometheus is worthwhile precisely because of these aspects, as they reinforce the movie's central theme, the universe's cosmic indifference to humanity. Firstly, reviewers point to the film's pretentious screenplay as a main criticism. They argue that, despite invoking profound inquiries into reality and creation, the movie is overly ambitious as it fails to provide answers to any of the questions it poses. To respond to that, I agree with the reviewers' criticisms here. However, Prometheus's ambiguity is appropriately intentional and advances its existential horror, as the universe itself refuses to answer these questions. Retrospectively, I'd struggle to understand why Prometheus was so universally rejected for incorporating heady concepts into its screenplay. For an original story, following a group of scientists that are determined to meet their maker is a genuinely gripping idea. But at the end of the day, that's all it is, a story, a framework for sci-fi experimentation. So who cares if Prometheus doesn't answer everything? It's not like this is meant to be some kind of sacred religious text, so it's entirely unreasonable to treat it as such. To further explain my point, the opening of Prometheus is fitting for analysis. Although fans have reached a consensus for what this scene means, in actuality it's remarkable in its sparseness and ambiguity. Slowly, the viewer is introduced to a hooded figure. This figure looks at a UFO, drinks black goo, and disintegrates down to the molecular level into a river. That's it. On those terms alone, this commitment to abstract symbolism is laudable for a blockbuster. Moreover, the ability for fans to derive a creation myth from it speaks to its deeply evocative visual language. Furthermore, this opening serves a functional purpose. It hangs over the remainder of Prometheus like a shadow, eerily gnawing at the back of the viewer's head. And it's precisely the lack of explanation for it that makes it so scary. If Ridley Scott had opened Prometheus with an expository text scroll, for example, then the mystery would be lost. Thus, the engineer's presence later in the film would lose his cosmic, terrifying power. Secondly, reviewers cite the film's irrational characters as a main criticism. More specifically, since Prometheus is littered with weak characterizations, the characters' actions are completely illogical. To respond to that, I agree with the reviewers' criticisms here. However, motivating the characters like this was an intentional choice, as it's meant to exemplify the irrationality of human nature at large. To further explain this point, the infamous falling spaceship scene deserves closer analysis. Of course, on a surface level, the characters running directly into the falling spaceship's path, instead of easily avoiding it by running parallel to it, appear silly. However, this reads as an intentional choice by Ridley Scott and his production crew. They could have easily added a diegetic boundary that forced the characters in one direction. So why didn't they? Well, looking at the scene's presentation, it's framed from these impossible wide and high angles. This formal device reorients the viewer into feeling as if they are a godlike figure objectively watching these events unfold. By invoking this perspective, Scott depicts how God views the actions of humanity, nakedly futile and doomed. Therefore, the much maligned Prometheus school of running away from things is in reality an evocative visual metaphor for cosmic horror. Thirdly, fans single out the movie's lack of resemblance to prior Alien films as a main criticism. Generally, fans feel betrayed that the movie strayed too far from what they originally loved about the franchise. To respond to that, I agree with the reviewer's assessment here. Prometheus is, indeed, an anomaly in the Alien franchise, but its unique way of continuing the series is what makes it special. Adopting an explicitly existential presentation, Prometheus sheds the genre constraints of survival horror and action which fans associate with the franchise. This shift to a looser and more ephemeral atmosphere works so well because the horror in the movie itself is intangible. After decades of Alien movies, Prometheus understands that the xenomorph simply isn't as scary as it used to be. Thus, it concerns itself with a concept far scarier, the cosmic horror of humanity's insignificance. With all that said, despite its unique identity, Prometheus doesn't get nearly enough credit for being an undeniably alien movie through and through. To further explain this point, take Shaw's climactic confrontation with the engineer, which is a perfect illustration of Prometheus's distinct identity melding with the Alien franchise. In this scene, the horror on display for an Alien movie immediately announces itself as different than usual. Said difference, however, is subtle. In past movies, the xenomorph kills because it is a perfect organism, a ruthlessly efficient killing machine. In stark contrast, the engineer's murderous motives in Prometheus are left ambiguous. The fear, thus, stems from this ambiguity. It forces the viewer to ask, why would my creator want to kill me? Ultimately, the sequence culminates in Shaw unleashing her alien offspring onto the engineer. In this moment, the existential horror of Prometheus symbolically merges with the survival horror of Alien. When viewed in that sense, it evokes a perfect visual representation of an Alien Legacy sequel, as the old and the new archetypal horrors are actively fighting each other to the death. What pushes this moment into the realm of the sublime, though, is Shaw's agency in pitting these two timeless forces against each other. Here, Prometheus suggests that, despite the cruelty and indifference of the universe, the human will persists above all else. With that scene in mind, although Prometheus strayed from the franchise's roots, it offered up an ample amount of fan service in return. This is what makes the fans' negative response to Prometheus so frustrating. In retrospect, it's clear how they affected the future trajectory of the franchise, as they got exactly what they asked for: thinly veiled remakes of the original Alien, with Covenant and Romulus, respectively. Sure, these entries aren't offensive, but they're the film equivalent of reheated nachos. And at their very best, reheated nachos will only ever be slightly satisfying. Therefore, viewers should always demand more from the movies than reheated nachos.
I think they want us to come and find them.
When taken all together, Prometheus's fixation with existential cosmic horror is exactly what makes it feel so profoundly human. If there's any other misunderstood or controversial movies like Prometheus that you'd like me to talk about, then please comment down below. You know, I made this whole video and I still don't know what to make of that one line.
It's like a scene out of some sort of Holocaust painting.